All right. Well, everyone, it is 3:30, and so we will go ahead and begin today's webinar. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. How was your day? A loaded question. This webinar is brought to you by our colleagues at the Supporting Heroes in Mental Health Foundational Training, also known as SHIFT, and also the Innocent Justice Foundation. Again, my name is William Moore, and I am with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention's National Training and Technical Assistance Center, also known as NTTAC. As your host, I would like to take a few minutes to go over a few features of Adobe webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be published on NTTAC's YouTube channel. The webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP NTTAC Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat pod. Here you will also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address technical related questions. Simply click on the name of the file and then click the download button. During today's webinar, presenters will address questions during our Q&A segment. Please type your questions into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you are viewing alone, there's no need to type anything to the chat pod at this time. And I'll give folks just a couple more seconds to do that. Again, if you are viewing alone, there is no need to type anything into the chat pod at this time. Only the total number of additional people in the room with you today. Following today's webinar, attendees will be sent a certificate of attendance. The certificate is sent, this certificate for this webinar will be sent in approximately 24 hours following the conclusion of the event. It will also be sent via an Adobe Connect thank you email. Please keep an eye on your email for your certificate. Please note that only participants that are registered and signed in will receive a certificate of attendance. And finally, at the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to a brief evaluation of today's presentation. The feedback you provide is used to assist in future planning and training. I will now turn today's webinar over to Elizabeth Tao. Please be mindful that all of our presenters' bios and handouts will be in the presenter and handouts pod as well. Now, turning over to Elizabeth Tao. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. On behalf of the Innocent Justice Foundation and the SHIFT program, I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar. We have two great presenters today, Carol and Anthony, that will be leading all of us through the material today. I will join you all in the chat window and also facilitate questions at the end. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol and Anthony and the content for today.
Good afternoon. This is Carol Bruska, and I'm with Anthony Mays today. And we're very excited to do this presentation on how to talk to your family members or your support group about the work that you do and the importance of doing that. So we're glad to be here today, and let's just jump right in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our objective today, we're going to talk about what SHIFT is, and amazing program that we've been doing across the country and internationally. And we'll talk about why you might feel hesitant to share about your day. I think we've all been there, and we're going to talk about how to discuss that. We're going to explain the benefits of sharing with your supports, your family, significant other, anyone that supports you in your life. We're going to talk about how and what is the best way to share your day with that person. And then we're going to look at the ways that you can open up about your day and feel comfortable about it.
So our first slide, what SHIFT is and what SHIFT isn't. SHIFT is awareness and education. It's preventative, and we believe that you're healthy. And that's so important to remember, that SHIFT is not about thinking that you are you have a problem or you have an illness or there's something wrong with you. We all understand that you have a level of health and wellness, and what we want to do is give you some more skills to help you increase that or to at least maintain where you've got. It is not treatment and counseling, and it's not fitness for duty. These are things that are completely unrelated to the SHIFT program, so we will not be discussing those things today. And it's certainly not a screening tool. So SHIFT is a program about education and educating you and your family members and your coworkers on how to be the best that you can be. So why do we not share? Why do we keep things to ourselves? A couple of reasons. You know, we want to protect our family, and you want to make sure that you're not letting any information go on the case. I know that Anthony, because he directly does the work, he can really talk about how he doesn't share intentionally.
Yeah, so, and that's very common. I mean, we're things in the media, all types of social media platforms, our families are definitely going to be exposed to it somewhere. So sharing just enough information so they understand what we do is important, and not giving them a lot of detailed information.
So another reason why we don't share, we might not be ready to talk about our work. So sometimes after a long day, you're still trying to process what happened and what it all meant and how you feel about it, and so you're not really ready to discuss that with anyone else. You can't even put it into words. Another thing, you might not really know how to express what you're feeling. So sometimes the emotions are very strong, and it's difficult to sort out if you're angry, if you're sad, if you're feeling helpless, hopeless, if you're feeling all of those or none of those. And if we don't know how to express what we're feeling, then it makes us resist discussing it at all. And then we also worry that if we talk about our feelings, it might change people's opinion of us. So if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others, then others might think that we aren't as strong as we like to believe we are, or others might think that we're not as tough, we don't have the ability to continue to do the work. You know, all of those things can go through our head, and not necessarily are any of those true, but it's a worry that we have. Another reason we don't share, we're not quite sure what kind of response we might get. So if we tell somebody how our day went, we might get the response like, I don't know how you do that work, or how can you continue to do that, or we might get I can't hear that. So if you're trying to tell someone about your day and the response you get is, ooh, I don't even want to hear about that, it makes you less likely to want to share. You might not get the response that you want as well. So if you're trying to talk to your loved one about what happened during your day and you get the response of, I don't want to hear about it, or I can't listen, or I'm too busy to hear, then that's going to be another reason why you're not going to be so excited about sharing.
Well, and I always think back, you know, I've been in law enforcement 30 years, and about 10 years ago, I came over to ICAC and started developing the ICAC task force for the state of New Mexico. And I had left a regular police department, traditional police department, retired from there. And I'd been in homicide, so I never really talked about homicide cases. And so when I started working ICAC cases, the first child abuse case I had was, or the first ICAC case was a child abuse case, and it was hands-on. And I'll never forget, and this is something I learned, is that I mentioned to my wife, I go, yes, this child was exploited, and I kind of gave some detail, not graphic detail, but enough detail to where she said, stop, I'm a mom, and I don't want to hear about that. And at that time I realized this is a different type of work, and it's not something that I should be sharing. And it's something we learn, and that was a reaction. And since then I've learned to share things, but definitely not give any type of detail.
So it is important to learn how to share in an appropriate manner. The reason that we want sharing is because it will help to increase your resilience. And what we know about resilience is that the presence and use of social support is going to increase your resilience. So by being able to figure out a way to talk to your support system and let them know what's going on, it will help you have that support in place when you do need to talk, which will increase the likelihood that you will have more resilience in your life. What is resilience? It's the ability to plan and take action. It's going to be, if you have that ability, then it's going the skill to bounce back after something difficult is there. You're going to be able to say, this is the things I can control, and so as respect to that, I will be able to plan and carry out those plans. It's having a positive self-assessment. So if you feel like what you're doing is worthwhile, if you have a good self-esteem, if you're able to take a look at your work and say, even though this work is very difficult, I was able to make a positive change in the world, that's going to help bring your positive self-assessment up, and that's going to bring your resilience up. If you have the skill to communicate and problem solve, that's going to help with your resilience. If you can talk about what you're feeling, and even if you say something like, I'm not ready to talk about what I'm feeling because I don't know what it is yet, that's still the ability to communicate. And being able to solve problems is going to help as well. That's going to give you the ability to not feel helpless and hopeless. And then being able to tolerate and manage strong feelings and impulses. So if you can do that, again, you can be able to figure out what you can say, what you can't say, how to support yourself, and then reach out to supports from others. So the benefits of sharing, definitely there are benefits to you. It's going to help build long-lasting relationships because, if you have the ability to talk to people about what's going on with you, then they're going to feel closer and more connected to you, and consequently, you're going to get that feeling of never being alone. You're going to get that feeling of feeling like somebody's got your back. It's going to decrease the questions that can take place. So it's going to, if you are able to share on your own, then you can kind of manage the situation and not have to reply to questions that might come up that you might not be prepared to answer. And it increases the feelings of being supported by allowing you to allow yourself to be vulnerable, and then as a consequence of that vulnerability, being able to get the support from others. It also allows you to explain why the work is so important to you. So if you do get the response of, I can't hear about that, or why do you want to do this work, having the ability to share and communicate is going to give you the chance to say, this is why I do the work, even though it's very hard, even though it might not make sense for other people to do this work. I do this work because it's very important to me, because I know that I'm out there changing the lives of individuals who are more vulnerable and less likely to be able to reach out for help themselves. So there's benefits as well for the family. It allows your family to feel that they're an important part of your life. Many times when I've been working with individuals, the common theme is that people don't share because they don't know how to share, and as a consequence of not sharing, they feel disconnected from their family, and their family feels disconnected from them. And then that's the time for issues and problems to arise in the relationship. So many times we talk about, If you go home and you don't say anything, and then your spouse is wondering what's going on with you because you're not saying anything. And it's kind of human nature for us to assume if someone isn't talking to us that it's something we've done wrong. So then this whole dialogue goes on in the head of your support person or your spouse or your significant other, and it's, what did I do wrong? Why are they treating me in this way? Oh my gosh, they must be mad at me. This whole dialogue of things that's going on that isn't accurate at all. It's just that you don't have the ability to express yourself at that time. So by being able to communicate, it's going to allow your family to feel they're an important part of your life, that even though you don't share everything, you do share what you can, and that they are valuable to you not only in your work but in your whole life. This will increase their feeling of connection with you and your connection with them, and it helps the family members to understand your moods and reactions. So if you can explain to them that, you know, the work that you're doing sometimes causes you to have feelings that you're not sure about, and because of that, you can't express them right away, but when you can, you will. And if there's signs that, if they notice these particular signs, like maybe you're a little bit withdrawn, or maybe you're more quiet or reserved, or maybe you need some time by yourself, if they can understand those moods and reactions, then they won't automatically take offense and think that there's something wrong. And it helps your family see that your work is meaningful and important to you, so they can understand that you don't do this work just because it's a job. You do this work because you know that you have the skills and the abilities to do something that many other people don't, and that you want to continue to do this work because you know that you can help others that are more vulnerable.
Now, it's interesting that we see that even with our children. So I have two daughters still under the age of, one's 13 and one is 17. And we've talked about this over the last 10 years, how I respond and how I am, and they can pick that up. Our children can see that. My daughters will immediately notice that something's gone at a difficult day because they can pick that up just by looking at your face, and your demeanor and your mood. And they've gotten into this habit now, as every day they'll ask, "So how was your day, Dad?" And and they know if I'll say something like, "Well, it was a great day," or I had, it was definitely productive. Of course, not getting into a lot of detail, but they pick that up just by looking at you and seeing that mood, and they can see our reactions and how we respond. So it's important to remember that children are very intuitive in what we do every day.
So just like Anthony was saying on the previous slide, it does benefit everyone. It sets an example for your children on healthy communication. So if your children witness you communicating even the difficult things, it will show them that it's okay to communicate our feelings. We don't have to keep those inside. And your children can see that even though maybe we don't always feel 100% happy, or there's times when we're withdrawn, or there's times when we're feeling sad, that's okay as well. So the example that you set for your children is going to be evident here. It's going to increase your listening skills, because when you are able to express to your family what you're feeling, it gives them the opportunity to express to you how what you are doing impacts them, and how what the role that you're playing plays a positive role in their life as well. So it gives you the chance to not only communicate, but to listen as well. It increases your effective communication skills by making you think through what you'd like to say, and then being fully present in that conversation when you're wanting to talk about that. And being able to talk about your work can also give you skills to use when there are other difficult topics. So for instance, if you're able to have a conversation with your loved ones about the difficult emotions that come up with your work, then that will also give you the ability to talk about difficult emotions that come up in other areas of your life. So for instance, if there was an illness in your family, or if there was a death in the family, or your family fell on a hard time, you would already have those skills in place that you could use, because everyone in your family would know how to communicate, and you could use those skills to express those difficult emotions with your family members. And it would give them the opportunity to know that in your home, it's a safe place to be able to talk about what you're feeling and not be judged and not be ridiculed for the feelings that you're having. Also, by sharing, you're going to increase the overall family satisfaction. This happens because when everyone feels like they are free to talk about what's going on with them without judgment, when they feel like all of the family members have each other's back, when you feel like you know that your family members care about you and care about how you feel, that's going to increase the overall family satisfaction. It's going to build the family resilience. So it's going to build the family's ability to bounce back after something difficult. We all know that throughout our lives, as a family member, there are times when we as a family struggle, not only as an individual but as a family. And if we know that there's somebody that's got our back and that we will go through this together, that's going to build the resilience of the whole family. And it lets each family member know they are valued and important. So in this role, each family member will say, I have an integral part in this family, and my part in this family matters. I am valuable, and the other people in this family count on me, and I know that I can count on them. So how can you go about sharing? You want to do something that you can talk about what you're feeling, but not the details. And I think this is kind of where people get stuck, because they think if I'm sharing about my work, I have to share the details of my work. I have to tell them what I did. I have to tell them what I experienced, what I saw, who I dealt with. And that's actually not the case at all. What you do need to share is your feelings around that. So we can talk about how it was a frustrating day because you weren't able to accomplish the things that you wanted, or it was a very rewarding day because you were able to, or it was a sad day because you saw some children that had been taken advantage of or exploited, and when that happens to you, it makes you sad. So the important thing to remember is that you want to focus on the feelings and not on the details of exactly what took place. And you want to talk about how the work can impact your view on the world. So this is very, very important. Maybe Anthony can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it's very easy for us to become looking at the world through a different set of glasses. I mean, it's easy for our children to pick that up. So, and that is true. I mean, not sharing the actual feelings. I mean, some of the things that I share with my children is that, for example, if a child uses an app and they're exploited somehow, I'll kind of share with them that sometimes as a person or a young person, we'll make decisions that may or may not be the best decisions, and I explain to them how that could happen, but again, not given a lot of detail, and because our children sometimes feel that we may be overreacting and things like that, and I've had my girls tell me that, and by explaining to them that, and in fact, it's not, it's just what's really taking place out there and what's happening, but again, not sharing those deep feelings and giving detail.
So you can also talk about your boundaries. So your family needs to respect your personal and professional space when you say, I can't talk about that right now, which is very, very important. And I know that people struggle to set that boundary, but the important thing is to have a conversation with your family and say, due to the nature of my work, and this work could be any kind of work where you're doing something that you cannot talk about the intensity of it. So it doesn't have to be just ICAT cases. It can be doing work as a therapist. It can be doing work as law enforcement in other arenas. It can be, if you're a military member, any kind of work where you cannot share the details of your work. This is the perfect, these are the perfect skills to use. So you might want to say something like, I can't talk about this right now, but explain to your family member ahead of time that there's a reason for that. And you can have a conversation when people are calm and say, There are times when I'm going to come home and I can't talk about what I'm feeling because it's too intense for me, or I can't talk about this feeling right now because I'm not sure how to process it, or I can't talk about this right now because if I feel like I would open up, I'm not going to be able to stop. I need to make sure that I don't let any of the information about this case go. So, but setting up that boundary when everyone is in a calm mood, not when you walk in the door and everyone starts talking to you and they say, well, tell us about your day, and then you snap back at them, I can't talk about this right now. That's not the good way to make that happen. So when everyone is calm and you can have a conversation about how to have a conversation about the work. You want to communicate with them that it's too soon and there's some things that won't help either of you to discuss. So you want to let them know, if I talk about this now, it's not going to be for my benefit or for your benefit, but I do want you to know that I love you and I care about you, and it's very important that you're here in my life. And when I can talk about it, then I will. So making sure you're setting that boundary, but doing it in a respectful, kind way, so that no matter what you have to say or what you can say at that time, they know that you do value them and that you do feel like you've got that support that you need.
Well, and having some type of process in place or a ritual that you do that your family knows, and you discuss it maybe outside of on a weekend. It's something that I did with my children. Like when I come home, they understand that I always look at it as a Mr. Rogers routine. I'll take off my shoes and it goes away, head upstairs, take my gun off, put it in a safe, take my cuffs off, and I'll change the clothes that I wore to work into something casual, and then engage the family that way. They know that I've taken off everything that has to do with work, and I'm ready to have that family time with them. And I've always had that in place. Our dog doesn't always understand that, of course, but children do, and they're always willing to wait a couple of minutes so I can have that transition from work to home.
So you also want to remember that you need to respect your supporters' experiences. So maybe if when you go home at night and you're talking to your family or your support and they don't have the time to listen to your emotion, so maybe you don't go home and talk about the details of your job, but you want to go home and say, I've had a really frustrating day today, and they can't hear it. You also need to respect that from them. So you can't just assume that just because you're going to be talking about things in an emotional feeling way that people are going to be able to hear it when you want to talk to them about it. So just like you want to be able to have respect and boundaries for what you need and want to say, you need to make sure that you have that for them as well. And, like it says there, remember that your supports have rough days too. So you might want to go home and really vent, but your family member needs to do that even more. So what the most important takeaway from this is making sure that you have a conversation with your family members way ahead of time to discuss how can we talk about things, how can we discuss when we've had a bad day, how do we signal to each other that we need some support without getting to the place where you're trying to ask for support or set a boundary with somebody right in the midst of a very emotional time period. If you're trying to do that, the likelihood of being successful is not very great. And you want to make sure that you're validating your support's feelings as well, because they might not feel their experience as significant as yours. If you're working in ICAT cases, for instance, and everyone knows the importance and the value and the magnitude of the work that you're doing, if your spouse works in a job that doesn't have that level of magnitude, they might feel like they can't expect the same amount of support from you as you from them, because they might not feel that their work is as potentially valuable. But each person has value, and each of your family members is valuable, and they need to be held to the same level of respect and concern and validation that you get as well. So it's a matter of making sure that everyone in the family has the chance to express what they're experiencing, and that all of the family members hold each other to a respectful standard. So timing is everything about when it's coming to sharing. So you want to make sure that it is the right time, right place, and then pay attention to the unspoken messages. So what this means is, just like I've been repeatedly saying, you want to have the pre-conversation before you have the conversation. And that pre-conversation goes something like, it's a Thursday evening and you've all had dinner and everybody's in a good space, and so you and your significant other, spouse, family, sit down and say, let's set some rules for how we're going to talk about things when we're feeling stressed, upset, concerned, sad, so that everyone will know how to go about that communication in a way that's useful to everybody. And so each individual person will have their own way to express their communication style and what they want to express, so that has to be taken into account. So you want to sit down, have a conversation, and say, okay, for me, when I'm feeling upset, what I need is 20 minutes by myself, and I will let you know that I'm upset by saying to you, wow, it's been one of those days. And so that's the key phrase that I'm going to say to everybody, and they automatically know that when I say, wow, it's been one of those days, I need 20 minutes. And then you go around, and whether you do this with your family or just with your significant other, and they say, when I'm having a rough day, this is what I will say, and this is what I need, and this is how you will know. It seems kind of silly that we have to do this proactively and beforehand, but that's how it's going to be successful. So it's just like if you have a fire extinguisher in your house and you never use that fire extinguisher and it sits in the box, then if there's a fire, you're not going to be able to be prepared to use that. By that same token, if you want these communication skills to work, then they have to be practiced ahead of time. So it's a matter of coming up with some ground rules, coming up with some cues that you can give to other people so that they will know what kind of space you're in, and letting them know what you need. And once you have these ground rules set, it might take some practice to make sure that everyone is doing things in the way that's best for the communication of the family. But it does, over time, work, and then it becomes habit, and then that habit just becomes a very, very supportive, natural environment. So what I recommend is people work out what their communication plan is and then put that on the refrigerator. So in the beginning, when you are using these skills, they might not come naturally, but if you have them on the refrigerator and you know, and you use your communication skill, and then you look at what your family member or significant other communication skill is, then it's going to be more and more automatic until it does become habit, and then it will increase the quality of the communication and how you share. So listen to the guidance of your loved one. What that means is when you're talking with them, have a conversation with, how much do you want me to share with you? How do you need to hear me? So I need to give you 10 minutes when I get home so that you can be prepared to talk to me? Or do we need to wait until after dinner? Or what are the ground rules around how I need to talk to you? So we need to be able to talk about our experience, but we need to make sure that they're in a place to hear it. And then come up with your strategy for when, how, and what. Understand the limits to what the loved ones can hear and understand. So if you come home and for many days in a row you're feeling very, very emotional and like you have a lot to say, it can be overwhelming for your loved one who wants to hold a space for you and be there for you, but they don't necessarily know how to do that. So if you need some support around that, then you can certainly look at some communication skills books. You can try going to a therapist to just see if you can get those communication skills, but you don't want to just give up. You want to make sure you try and try and try again. So another way you can share is by talking about happy family members. I know Anthony, that's what they do at their house.
Yeah, we do that quite a bit. So talk about maybe something as fun as going on a vacation, going camping, or a fishing trip, or Disneyland. This weekend we spent the time talking about all the trips that we went on over the last couple of years, and in fact my my girls started reminiscing and saying they wish they could be 5 again and be princesses of Disney. It's important to laugh together, and have fun with the family and laugh and play games. It's something hard to do with children nowadays, especially with technology. They're always in front of a screen. And it's something that I've been practicing more this weekend. Actually, we played a board game, and I had the kids check their phones in at the door, basically, and we had fun doing that. And then cooking together. And it's something that I strongly recommend, especially, with your significant other. That's always fun, taking a cooking class together and coming up with some really creative meals. And something that I've been doing a lot more recently is cooking with my daughters. At their age, they're being 13 and 17, they enjoy it. The 13 enjoys it more than the 17-year-old does. But cooking and having fun doing that together. Again, sharing those moments. And they see mom and dad outside of work and at home and having fun and understanding that we have a different life from work.
And these all are important because not only is it good for something that's going on in the moment, so in the moment, these events are causing happiness in your life, but then those are the memories that you can lean back on. So when things are really rough and the family's having a rough day or going through a hard time, those are the things that they can look back on and remember that there are times in our life where things are bad, but there's lots and lots of positive memories. Laughing together, talking about the memories, cooking, all of those things are going to be a great way to do that. If you are cooking with your children, not only is it a way for everyone to be involved in something, but it's also a skill that your children can learn. So these are just a few examples. I'm sure that as individual family members, you can think about things that you do together that bring you happiness. Like Anthony was saying, maybe it's going on vacation. It could be just going to the movies. It could be going for walks together, hiking. Anything that brings you together as a family will help increase the resilience and the strength of your family as time goes by. So it's important that you increase the family connection because, like it says here, people prefer to be around others who are happy. We like to be around people that are lighthearted and that are supportive and that are fun to be around. I don't know many people that want to be around someone who's depressed and angry and not feeling well. It's just harder. So not that every day should be a happy day and that there should never be any sadness or anything going on in your life, but if we can try to focus on what the positive things are so we can increase our happiness in our family, that's going to make the whole family feel closer together. And if you or your family are able to be happy together, obviously this is going to increase both your sense of support and your positive memories. So there's this interesting thing that happens in our brain, and when we think of positive memories and the more detail we have, those actual hormones that were released during that initial event are reproduced. So if you as a family had a wonderful trip to Disneyland and you all sit around together talking about that wonderful trip and each person shares their memory of that event and it's decided that that was a great time and you'd like to do it again, what's going on in your brain is the hormones that you were producing when you were in that event are being reproduced now. So consequently, everything that all of those good feelings are being shared again, and then that's going to increase the support, that's going to increase the connection, that's going to make the children or your family remember that time in a positive light, and then you can use that as a resource when things aren't going so well. Doing hobbies and activities together will build your own resilience and the resilience of your family. Obviously, that's pretty self-explanatory. So if you're doing things together, then that's going to bring you closer. And if you have hobbies and activities that you can do, then that's going to give you something to do other than, maybe you come home and watch TV where there's not interacting, or maybe you everybody comes home and they all go off in their separate rooms and do things without each other. If you're able to do hobbies and activities together, that's going to strengthen the bond that you have with your family, and it's also going to help to really bring everyone closer, and it's going to be setting a tone for your children about the importance of family. And if you're like me, I want to make sure that my child is there to take care of me when I'm old. So I want to do whatever I can to make sure he feels connected to me now.
Most recently we had a big mob of people by our park playing Pokemon Go, and most of them were families. And my daughter commented, she goes, "Look at them, Dad. They're all stuck on their phones, and they're out there together as a family." I go, "Yeah, but they're out there playing Pokemon Go, getting some fresh air, and they're still together, and it's their way of being together as a family." And any way you can do that, being creative is important, and doing something that works best for you and your family.
And it's going to help with the increase in overall communication. So the ways to do this, we're going to be discussing wellness plans and mission statements in an upcoming webinar, so we'd love you to join us then. But these are all tools that you can use to really set down in stone how it is that you want to be as a family, how you want to carry out your family mission, and what you can do to feel connected and close as a family. So we want to make sure that you have the strength of a good, strong family foundation so that when times are rough for you or your family members, then you will have someone to rely on and someone that you can count on. So please let us know if you have any questions. We're anxious to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Carol and Anthony. I do have a couple of questions that came in while you guys were speaking, and I will go ahead and give those to you now. So the first one is, what are your opinions of introducing training for law enforcement families?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. We actually, Anthony and I did a law enforcement family training, I think it was probably about a year ago, and it's probably on the SHIFT website. It's very, very important to make sure that your families feel supported, and that if you can have the families involved in any kind of training that talks about how they can increase communication from their side, that's going to be beneficial.
Great. And Anthony, can I get your perspective on that based on being within the law enforcement community and how you see that as an important step to include the families?
Definitely. Thank you for asking. So that's, well, first of all, that's some of the feedback that we've received from law enforcement families within the task force, within my task force and throughout the country, is that families really don't understand what we do. And that could be any part of law enforcement. As you know, I worked in violent crimes for a number of years prior to coming over to ICAC and net crimes against children and human trafficking. And so when Carol and I decided to develop the family program, it really helped. So bringing the families together, and we asked for their feedback so they understand what part of that training. We brought them in and showed them the workspace where their significant other works, and just a general work area and their environment, and some of the things that they have to be exposed to, and not images and things like that. Nothing graphic, of course, but so they understand what the work environment looks like. In our case here, we showed family members the lab and what kind of things that are done in the lab as well, our mobile forensic or our computer forensic lab. And then Carol spent some time talking about some of those indicators that when the significant other comes home and how they may respond and some of the things that they may be dealing with and how to best work with them. And I've received some very positive responses, feedback from family members that attended that type of training, and also from the agents, their family members. They've come in and said things are a little bit different at home now because they really understand what we do and they understand how to support us better. So I strongly encourage whatever field you may be in, especially if you're law enforcement, to share that part of your life with your family. I mean, and it's easy to do with children as well. I've had my daughters here work with me, and they've spent half a day with me just showing, and I've shown them around and shown some of the things that I may have to do, again, with no actual content, but understanding what we do. So when you're talking about that at home and you're looking for someone's for some support, they understand what you're seeing.
Perfect, thank you. And we had a question that came in a little bit later, but I'm going to jump ahead to it because I think it fits in well here. Can you, Carol, maybe talk about what age should families start talking to their kids and bring it all together?
So you want to, I mean, if you're talking about communication in general, that's something that you want to start showing your children communication skills as soon as you possibly can. So and the best way to do that is to use those skills with your children. Now, talking about your feelings and the work that you do, if you're just going to be talking about feelings, you can do that from a very young age as well. So when you notice that your child is feeling really angry or sad, or you reflect that back to them, it looks like you're feeling really sad right now. And you can do that at a very, very young age. So then they become aware of what they're being able to label what they're feeling. So that allows them to be able to express that as they get older and recognize, wow, I'm feeling really sad right now, because they know what that emotion, what the label is for that emotion. So you can do that from a very young age, and then as your children get older, depending on what you want to talk to them about with respect to your work, you can talk to them in very basic terms. So you can just say, you know, I know Anthony says about that Dad goes to work to help children. You know, it's something where you don't have to give any detail, but it just gives an indicator of what it is, what kind of work you're doing. But that can start at a very young age. And then, you know, you all know your children much better than I would know them. So how much can they handle? What, you know, at what point do you want to say that the work that you're doing, if you're doing Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force work, if at what point do you want to say that you're helping catch child exploitation exploiters? That's up to you. But I think I would say less is more until they ask the questions. So if your children are asking the questions, then that's when you start the dialogue. But up until that point, just bare minimum, I think, on what you're giving them, because until they're ready to ask the question, they're probably not even thinking about how to ask the question themselves.
Great, thanks. And I'm going to add one thing to that, and this is something that Carol actually always tells us, is to make sure that when you're talking to your kids, especially, and even adults, make sure you ask them to repeat what they heard you say, because many times our brain is already making things up or jumping ahead, or we're not really hearing what's going on. And I know Carol always used the example of when she was little, she heard her parents talking about getting fired, and her cousins played like catching each other on fire. So instead of somebody getting laid off of work, because that wasn't within their scope of understanding. So I know Carol always tells that story in class, but I wanted to kind of reiterate that it works for many things. Ask your kids, ask your significant other, like, how did you hear me explain that? Because I want to make sure that I'm giving you the best definition and the best examples that I can. And I think it's always important to ask that question.
And that's absolutely right. Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say that's absolutely right, because if your spouse, it's a highly emotional situation and your spouse thinks that you say something that you didn't say, it's important for them to understand. And you don't have to say, like, did you hear me? You can say, you know, I just want to make sure you heard what I said. So could you kind of tell me what you heard that I said? Because you want to make sure that you're both on the same page and things are not turning a bad situation. We did see, and I don't know, Elizabeth, if you saw this, there was asking about how can we make amends if the conversation goes bad. I'm not sure if you saw that. We saw that on the chat. My suggestion on that is just really be honest. I'm sorry that this didn't go like we planned. What do we need to do differently next time to make it work better?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for adding that. I was going to throw that in at you also, and I think that's a great idea. And also, you know, we also talk about honoring each other to say, look, I can't do this, but make a date to talk about it again. Make sure you say, you know, we're both emotional right now, but tomorrow night or tomorrow at, lunchtime, or tomorrow after the kids go to bed, I would like to revisit this. I know we're not in the space to do it right now. And then make sure you go back and do that. The last thing you want to do is leave something kind of hanging out there in the open. So make sure you say, I will go back and talk about it at this point, and then go back and do that. And then everybody will feel that, number one, they're being heard, and that it's important for that conversation to continue. Okay, we have a couple questions about shifts specifically on here, and I want to answer those. We have about 5 more minutes, so I want to make sure I get to those. So the SHIFT program, we are funded through the Department of Justice, OJJDP, to do training throughout the United States on mental health and wellness within the ITAC and their affiliates. ITAC is Internet Crimes Against Children. And we are super lucky because we're able to not only train the ITAC and the law enforcement piece, but we're able to train all of the affiliates. That is everybody, probation, parole, that's prosecutors, that's juvenile justice, that's caseworkers, SANE nurses, advocacy. Anything that you all have any touch on the child crime spectrum, we're actually able to do that and come to you and have training. My email will be up here at the end. It's elizabeth@innocentjustice.org. And I'm also the one that would plan all of those. Our calendar goes out into actually 2020 right now. But please let me know if you guys have any questions about what we can offer, and I can also clarify what we have online. There's some messages here that are asking if you can use the information. You can use the information. I believe in sharing what we have. I do appreciate you giving credit where credit is due. We have a lot of trainers. All of our classes are trained, as you can hear today, with a law enforcement professional. Today we had Anthony, and a mental health professional. Today we had Carol with us. So all of that information is shared in a pretty specific way, and we want to make sure that it kind of just continues to go that way. So if anybody has any further questions about SHIFT specifically, please let me know. Again, I'm Elizabeth, and my information will be up at the end. I am double checking for some more questions. It looks like right now, unless somebody has some additional questions they want to type to us, we are happy to answer those. We have a direct line to some very smart people. And I wanted to just add, I know we have a lot of thanks for the program and thanks for the information that Anthony and Carol presented. I also wanted to thank everybody on the line for the jobs that you guys do. I know we are always in awe and much appreciation of your guys' work as well. I do want to say, and I know that we're going to add this, there's going to be a slide about it. We do have a follow-up webinar that Carol kind of talked about when she was talking about wellness plans and family plans. We're going to go into that specifically on July 16th. So please join us for that as well. Again, we'll have a slide coming up here in a second, but I wanted to make sure that you guys all knew about that.
Great. And
we also do have...
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was just going to say really quick, William, that we do have some information on our website under our resources, and that's shiftwellness.net, and what we have there we're always happy to share. Looks like we have another question that came in. Does SHIFT go into the realm of peer support? We do talk about peer support as one of many tools that we suggest for wellness. So we don't go into specifically setting up a peer support group, but we also have a lot of friends who do that and a lot of information. So we're happy to pass that along if you're trying to actually set up a peer support group. But we do talk about that in our main classes as an option. I think there's a question about when will the registration link be released. It will actually be in this PowerPoint, and you can also find it on our website as well as NTTAC's website. Maybe William can finish up on that for us.
All right, great. Well, if we don't have any other questions that are coming in, Elizabeth, would you like me to wrap us up for the afternoon?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, again, thank you to our audience members and to everyone. And again, the contact information for everyone is indeed on this slide here. And so I did want to make sure that you all have access to that. Remember, the handouts pods have the actual slides as well, where you can have all this information too. But before we wrap up, just a couple of last minute announcements for you all. Please make sure that you join for our next webinar coming up in the Shift webinars series, Happiness from the Inside Out, scheduled for July 16, 3:30 to 4:30 Eastern Time. Please note the registration link is indeed live and is available here, this particular slide. You may contact NTTAC through the website displayed on this slide. You can stay up to date on the latest information by signing up for NTTAC's TTA listserv as well. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. And remember, you can also contact the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention with the information on this slide via the Help Desk. Do you have a training and technical assistance need? Well, if so, please submit a request via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform. It can be accessed through the link displayed on this slide. And as a reminder, the webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. Please take a couple of seconds to review the disclaimer. And lastly, we would appreciate if you could take about 5 minutes to complete the feedback evaluation. Again, thank you all for joining us again today. Have a great afternoon.